Hello, folks, and welcome to The Suave Critic, a fight against Mind-numb Mainstream Cinema. Today we look at The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser, an enlightening movie by Werner Herzog, which, in my book, creates one of the most goosebump-inducing characters of all time. Before we start, you might want to consider subscribing to this channel and hitting the bell icon in order to be a part of this community. Frankly, I wasn't prepared for this experience because I had no information or understanding about this movie beforehand. The premise of the movie is this one man called Kaspar Hauser who has been deliberately kept away from society and nature within the confines of this cell, kept away from all of humanity. And there's this one mystery man who keeps feeding him and at times takes him out to learn basic motor skills, and then ultimately he is randomly released into a village where the people of this village take up this enigmatic case and he has to learn what it means to be a human. This exploration yields extremely enlightening facts about the nature of life and humanity. So the movie begins with very sublime shots of nature, along with very sophisticated faces of a woman. And we realize that we are first presented with all the sophisticated formalism of human society before it is abruptly broken when we cut to the title sequence. The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser is about a man who essentially shatters this formalism of society and then brings about some very harsh truths about it. So, Kasper, when one fine day is taken to a village out of nowhere and is deserted there by the same mystery man who fed him and helped him grow up through the years, he does not know what to do. He finds himself in this absolutely helpless state where he cannot comply to anything because he has only been taught all his life to comply to this mystery man. And at this point, when another man from the village approaches him, you see Kasper helplessly staring at the frame, helplessly staring at the superhuman eye of the camera. And I find this very strong. For me, this is a realist's question to formalism and structure. Because Kasper is in this helpless state where he cannot look anywhere, his subconscious looks at the camera, and that is quite interesting for me. As a matter of fact, the first thing that society teaches him after they take up his case is emptiness. And I find this very interesting because us as viewers are constantly reminded of his empty face, of the idea that he has been taught nothing, and he ultimately also starts realizing that the only idea that defines him is a sense of emptiness, right? And then ultimately, slowly and steadily, he understands even harsher truths about society. But what is so enlightening about Kaspar Hauser's influence on society? While he is learning society, he also ends up exposing it in many ways. In one of the most primitive ways, he realizes that women in society, while they are living beings and while they live alongside men, they actually serve a more secondary role of only knitting and sitting all day. And Kasper questions this. For him, each living being, in fact, each thing is a living being. He even considers an apple a living being with his own decision system. And for him, it becomes confusing and perplexing as to why women only knit in this particular society. He goes on to question faith in a very primal way. Unlike a philosopher's intellectual criticism of faith and sexism, Kasper's criticism is very fundamental. It is as simple as Nietzsche's empty proclamations about God's existence initially, before he sort of develops his theory and explains himself. So I found this very interesting, and at a further stage of enlightenment, when talking about faith, you see that Kaspar Hauser starts getting dreams and visions. And these dreams and visions become a means of talking about some fundamental truths that humanity doesn't confront on a daily basis. He describes a dream that he gets in the middle of the night, wherein he views a certain group of people climbing a mountain, such that the top of the mountain means death. Kaspar Hauser on a daily basis realizes that each living day is actually a march towards inevitable death. And that is quite fundamental and profound in itself. Then we also see in his final days, when there are traitors attacking him, in his final moments and words, he talks about something of a prophecy. He talks about a story which he knows the beginning of, but he does not know the end of the story. It's a story of a desert. In this story, you have a blind old man who, in the middle of a desert, by virtue of his blindness, tastes sand and realizes that there is no oasis that the young people around him are dreaming of. In my view, Kaspar Hauser in this movie and in this world is a similar blind man. He is disabled such that he has no intellectual knowledge or even basic cognitive ability, but he is able to taste the sand of society and in turn talk about it. And it is because of this that I find this fundamental premise very enlightening, and I feel this movie has moved me so deeply, even because of one of my favorite scenes where Kasper, who has no knowledge of feeling, who has no knowledge of emotions, puts a finger over fire, something that he has never experienced. And while he realizes that he cannot feel, he cannot emote, deep inside of him, he gets this burden of feeling, which manifests as tears on an empty face. And it is a face that I can never ever forget. And I'd say that simply for moments like these, Kaspar Hauser and his Enigma are some things to explore, and this makes Werner Herzog's movie a fundamental masterpiece.